McMichael Canadian Art Collection is located on the territory of the Mississauga of the Credit, traditional lands of the Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat people. The McMichael is uniquely situated along the Carrying Place Trail, which provided an integral connection for Indigenous people between Ontario's lakeshore and the Lake Simcoe, Georgian Bay region. And we're going to talk a little bit about Bonnie's beautiful mural about the Carrying Place Trail just in a moment, but it's a very auspicious weekend for us to have you all here because it's so ravishingly beautiful outside. And this is the kind of weather, I'm originally from British Columbia, but I came to appreciate Norval Morrisseau's color palette only when I moved to Ontario and started seeing that this is actually, you know, the color of our world here in Ontario, these vibrant oranges and cobalt blues. It always seemed like a bit of a stretch from the vantage point of the, you know, gray, black, and dark green rainforests of British Columbia, but it is truly beautiful. It's auspicious also to have you with us today because we're just in the days before the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, which is on Tuesday. And it's a special day for us to come together and think about all the issues and stories and conditions that this exhibition prompts us to think about deeply. I want to thank everyone who's helped us to build this important collection over many years. The curators who've come before me and museum directors who've been committed to the place of Indigenous art and culture in the McMichael, and that goes right back to our rather wacky but in many ways endearing founder, Robert McMichael, who had the insight to understand after a really important encounter with Bill Reed that you couldn't do a museum about this part of the world without incorporating an Indigenous voice and creativity in that. And so that sort of set the ball in motion. There's some people who have helped us with the book and the exhibition itself. Power Corporation of Canada. In attendance, we have Louis Michel Taillefer, who's here and sitting right there. Thank you so much for being with us. And Louis was also, I think, part of the team at BMO when BMO made its extraordinary pledge of almost $250,000 to help us to acquire a whole generation of Indigenous artists that had been kind of left by the wayside, had not been collected at the McMichael. There were just no resources being raised for that, and acquisitions had become really, you know, a matter of what was offered to us over the transom rather than being able to go out and say, you know, who are the artists we need to have represented here and go after those careers. And we were able to do that thanks to BMO. So I've got two reasons to thank you today, Louis Michel. Patty Bunston-Gunn and Stephen Gunn are here with us today. John Ecker from the Ontario Cultural Attractions Fund is here, and they support us in so many of our endeavors. They obviously deeply understand the role that this institution plays, not just in attracting visitors, but in explaining to the world, people that are coming here from elsewhere, what this place is all about. And we are so grateful for their solidarity. Also, Jamie Cameron is here. The dynamic duo of Jamie Cameron and Chris Brett cannot be denied. She's blushing in the second row here. But as you go through the exhibition today, after we have this talk, please look a little bit at the labels here and there, and you will see that lovely refrain of Jamie Cameron and Chris Brett, particularly perhaps in the last gallery where we have so many of their spectacular works of Inuit art that they've given or lent to the gallery over many years, and they're gracious enough that they are leading collectors of Inuit art in this country and profound collectors of Indigenous art more generally, but they basically allow us to work with their collection as if it was our very own. And so we're family, and we're so grateful for that. And Rand Lomas and Linda are also here today, who are sponsors of this exhibition, who support us in so many ways at the McMichael. Rand is the head of our art acquisition committee, and so it's up to me to convince Rand and our merry band of all the rather extraordinary things we're doing in acquisitions right now at the McMichael, so he's a great partner in that. But the person who is our lead supporter today is Don Stewart of Dixon Mitchell, who's in the front row and who'll be having a few words with you in a moment. But Dawn has been just, the dream sponsor every woman dreams of, which is someone who reaches out and contacts you saying, we'd like to talk, we'd like to help, we hear what you're doing at the McMichael is important. If you're making a tour of the downstairs gallery today, you'll see a work by Lawrence Paul Yaxwellupton, which depicts the children who were killed in the residential schools rising up and going home. It's an extremely powerful painting. We've had so many powerful teaching moments with this painting, including one just the other night with a group of clients and donors. Standing soundlessly in front of this painting for a minute, I'll not soon forget. And Don's company, as he'll explain, manages the resources of a number of Indigenous groups from across Canada, and his enlightenment and sort of bushy-tailed enthusiasm and willingness to lean in. I forgot to mention the story I was going to tell you about that painting downstairs. It was Don who had the idea to talk to Lawrence Paul Yaxwellupton about doing a painting that could be sold to benefit the Orange Shirt Society. And I understand that took a little doing, that you had to go kind of hang around the coffee shop, and Lawrence is not the most biddable human being on the planet. And so, he hung in and he convinced him, and then a client bought that at Hupfield and immediately phoned our museum and said, could you use this in your collection? He was living in Singapore at the time, and we've had it on display ever since. But there's several little degrees of separation that were between us, but we're together now, and thank goodness for that. So Don, can I invite you to say a few words to the gang here?
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, that gives some context as to why we're here. We're a Vancouver-based firm. We have an office in Calgary, and so of course it's a bit of a reach for us to be 3,000 miles away from home supporting an event, but it's really that Indigenous connection for us. So we look after assets for about 45 nations across the country, including 18 here in Ontario. And so art has been our way of giving back and connecting with those communities. I do some work with the Vancouver Art Gallery, and that's where I got to know Lawrence Paul Yaxwellupton, who, as Sarah described, was not an easy convince to do that piece of art. But the genesis of it was heading up to the first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. We had a survivor come in and speak to our staff, because as senior people, we were out getting to know our nations and then understanding what that meant to them, but we wanted to make sure that they were connected as well. And so that was very moving, and so we decided, well, we want to do something special ahead of that first day. And so instead of just giving a donation, we had this idea to commission a piece of art. And when we eventually commissioned Lawrence, the piece that he produced is downstairs, and so we auctioned that off. And as Sarah said, we gave half the proceeds to the Orange Shirt Society and half to the Indian Residential School Survivor Society, which had brought the woman out to speak to our group. And so that kind of put our mark on Indigenous art in Canada. We've sponsored a couple of exhibits since then. So we're very proud to be here. Naturally, we also want to grow in Ontario. We've just opened a bit of a footprint here, so a little bit of name recognition doesn't hurt. But we're very, very happy to be involved. Very happy to put our resources behind such a great exhibit, and hope everyone enjoys it and gets the impact that the group did on Thursday night when they went through and heard the stories behind all the pieces. So thank you very much.
Okay, so before Bonnie gets busy with her wonderful panel, we have a very special opportunity for all of us today, which is to share in a performance by Maria Hupfield. We're so proud to have Maria in our collection here at the McMichael. You will have seen as you walk through one of her wonderful gray felt jingle bags right at the entrance to the show in the section that deals with regalia. We also have two wonderful paintings that have recently come into the collection from Native Art Department International, which is the collective that she operates with Jason Lewin. And one of them is hanging right over there. You can see that they are, well, and also right here on the screen is the other one. Spectacular responses to the legacy of Norval Morrisseau, like vivid, alive kind of abstractions that kind of tell the next story of the next generation. Maria is an urban off-reservation member of the Anishinaabeg people, belonging to the Waskausking First Nation in Ontario. Hupfield is the inaugural City of Toronto Artist in Residence and was awarded her Toronto Friends of the Visual Art Prize in 2023. Her art has traveled nationally with Beat Nation, which was produced by Grunt Gallery in Vancouver, and she's had solo projects and exhibitions with the Heard Museum in Phoenix, the Power Plant in Toronto. Her work has appeared at the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts, the National Gallery of Canada, of course, North America Native Museum in Zurich, the National Museum of the American Indian, and Museum of Arts and Design in New York. I'm just going to cut through. This is a very long list. Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, Site Santa Fe, where she represented Canada there as well. She's an extraordinary talent, a great teacher. She's involved in teaching at the University of Toronto and leading the next generation forward. A great presence in our midst, Maria Hupfield. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm just at the back here. I'm doing my best to manifest from within childlike simplicity. I'm caught in a transformation. I feel like a man with a bubble in his mouth. I'll do my best to channel the Thunderbird with inner spirit. I'm Maria Hupfield. Welcome. It's really good to see everyone. Here we are in the early days. When I was invited to come and do a performance this afternoon, I thought, good, I have a few burning questions of my own. So I put out some texts to a few people I know, and I asked, we've come a long way. Is there anything you're thinking about? Where are you at? And I got a few responses. So this afternoon, what I'd like to do is share with you 4 of those questions that came to me. So I'm going to share those with you now. Since I'm a performance artist, things might get a little, I'm going to come down here to your level. So question number 1 asks Western art. So wait, when I say Western art, let's take a moment. This looks like a very sophisticated audience here. You know what art is. You know what Western art is. We're not talking about the Wild West. Maybe we're talking a little bit about cowboys. We're talking about Indians here. So that's what Western art is. So Western art went through realism. We know what that is. It's when paintings look like real things, right? Cubism, things look like cubes, right? Dadaism, the name speaks for itself. Surrealism, that clock is melting. So the question asks, what are the movements that Anishinaabe art has gone through? Now, I'll just take a moment here. I've kind of introduced myself. I'm Maria Hupfield, Wabazikwe Nindejnaka, Wabajejin Dam, Wasoxing, Nintonjaba, Anishinaabe, Minawajaganash. So I'm Anishinaabe Nation. So this question comes to me from Alan Corbier. And he's in the book. There's a picture of him. So let me look around here. I see a lot of friendly faces. I feel a little shy right now, but I'm going to come over here. Excuse me, young lady. You probably don't remember me, but we've met before at least once. Do you know of any movements that Anishinaabe art has gone through?
The Woodland School.
The Woodland School. And your name's Shelley, right? Shelley. Shelley, are you Anishinaabe?
Part Anishinaabe,
Oh, what's the other part?
Mohawk.
Mohawk. Do you feel like you know you have enough knowledge of art and the world to connect with and speak to some Anishinaabe movements? Do you think you need to be Anishinaabe to connect to those?
I think it helps, makes it more fun, makes it more interesting and exciting.
So you can go really deep into that. Thank you, Shelley. I mean, it looked like you had an itch to scratch, so I wanted to come check. Maybe a 500-year itch. All right, well, thank you, Alan Corbier, for that question. So that was question number 1. Question number 2. So question number 2 also comes from Alan Corbier. Alan, he's got so many questions. So he wants to know, what is the Anishinaabe word for art? Now, this has been going around for a while, this conversation, like there is in Indigenous cultures, in different nations. We have no word for art. We just don't understand what art is. We didn't have it. But he's pushing back and saying, you know, he believes there is a word. Like, does this sound familiar, Barry? Barry. Thank you, Barry Ace. Have you?
That's the word.
Why, I love it. Thank you, Barry Ace. I mean, he's not called Ace for nothing. So Alan proposed this other word. I'll try my best to share it with you. It's mazine. Oh, do you want to?
Mizinobikoen.
That's right. Okay, and that is a very specific word, though.
Yes, it's about drawing.
That's right.
About making a mark. And it also has the connotation of reading as well. So it is about teaching.
Very nice. Okay, yes, that is the word. I mean, of course you know this. You're really good friends with Alan Corbier, Bonnie Devine, everyone. Thank you, curator. So he also poses, he says, well, yes, absolutely, that's a word for drawing and writing. Also similar word used for books, but it's not the same word we would use for weaving or for sculpting. So that was question number 2. All right, thank you, everyone. So just gonna venture a little deeper in here. Early days. So we really are at the early days here. I'm trying to think how old Canada is. Can someone Google that quickly for me? Anyone know how old is Canada?
The country called Canada?
The country called Canada.
1867.
All right, so how many years is that? Right, 158, thank you. So if I'm 50 now, that would be like 3 of my lifetimes, right? Okay, so Canada, maybe it's still in its early days a little too, right? A little bit. If we think of how old Egypt is, right? Like, what's that? 5,000 years? Okay. So, early days. I just want to acknowledge this amazing bench that's right here in front of me. I've heard that this bench, there can seat 150 children. and it's made from red cedar. I'm trying to think about a tree that big, a history that big, right? And it's interesting that it's lined right up with this funeral pole at the end. So just to acknowledge some of the others who are in this room with us here, as we are still in the early days. Let's put this in here. All right. So here we are in the early days. Got the catalog. The back says, change requires boldness. And a shared, unexpected boldness is in the air. It's still early days, no doubt about it. But movement has begun. All right, question number 3. This person asks, do we really need to art world for our art? Do we really need to art world for our art? Hey there. What's your name?
Jason Lujan.
All right, Jason, you look like, you really stand out. Like, it doesn't look like you're from around here. Where are you from?
Marfa, Texas.
Okay, hold on a second. Let me get it straight. You said Marfa, Texas? How do I know that place, Marfa?
Donald Judd,
And
Chinati Foundation,
Donald Judge, Naughty Foundation.
and Jason Lujan.
And Jason Lujan. Okay, hold on a second. So this is all sounding very art world to me, from here in Kleinburg this afternoon. And I just have to wonder, so you're literally telling me when you go home, when you go back to the place where you grew up, you are actually art worlding? Are you art worlding? Because that sounds very art world to me.
It's a spectrum.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, my husband, Jason Lujan. I just want to say that when I go home to Carling Township, I'm not art worlding. People go there for very different things. It's in the Georgian Bay area. If you know Georgian Bay, put your hand up. Yeah, right? Like we're going there to go in boats, to go fishing for some good times. Yeah, okay, Jason, thank you. So that question comes from Taqualuck Partridge. I'm going to leave that question with us because I just want to point out that I noticed on Instagram that Taqualuck is in the UK. So working on an amazing next project. So maybe that's a question to put forth for that amazing panel that will be coming up shortly. All these amazing, talented, beautiful people who have been art worlding for a long time. Greater minds can put forth that. So thank you, Taqualuck. For question number 3. All right, so question number 4, this is the last question I'll ask, so I'm just gonna wrap this up. This comes all the way from Manitoulin Island. The question asks, what does it look like when Native art becomes part of how we talk about capital A art and not a separate zone? I think it's a very big question, maybe bigger than us. I don't know, is there anyone in here who feels like taking on this question? Okay, well, what I will do, so this question comes from the beautiful Anung Beam. Anung, or Nungos, meaning star beam, the child of the late Carl Beam and Anne Beam, 2 amazing Canadian artists. So of course, she would ask, right? Capital A art, are we there? And I feel like the exhibition that we're all here to celebrate really puts that forth. So I'm going to leave that question in the air for everyone as we think ahead. We can leave that question as something to dream towards, to think towards, to imagine towards. And that's it. So this will conclude question number 4. Before I head out, I just want to thank the McMichaels so much for inviting me to come here and do this performance. And thank you, everyone, for being here. Shemiigwech. Also, lastly, Shemiigwech to Olivia Short, who is artist in residence at the Indigenous Creation Studio. Thank you for joining me in this performance. Do I want to what? Streamers? Oh, yeah. All right, I have one last thing here. All right. Thank you. You got yours? Hold on, I think I might have 2 more. All right, sorry, I'm gonna throw this out. Oh, all right, I'm gonna pass this one to you. All right, okay, so we can just tear this front piece off and woo! All right, early days. I forgot about the streamers. Let's just take them.
Oh, that was just amazing. Thank you both so much. What a wonderful moment for us to have at the McMichael. Bonnie Devine. What can we say? Bonnie is an off-reserve member of the Serpent River Anishinaabe First Nation. I'm introducing Bonnie today, and then Bonnie will be introducing our wonderful panel. She's the creator of, when you came into the gallery and came upstairs here, you will have seen her beautiful mural, From Water to Water, Away Through the Trees, which was made here 3 years ago, 4, 2021, 4 years ago now. The idea was it was going to be a temporary installation. That didn't happen. Like it got, you know, it was a wall mural that was telling really the stories about, you know, bringing us deeper into our site on the Carrying Place Trail, and Bonnie did a lot of research about that. She's actually working on a book right now about the Carrying Place Trail that we will be bringing forward probably about 6 months or so from now, depending on how everything goes. But I feel like Bonnie is deeply a part of what we're doing at the McMichael. She's had many different relationships with different curators at the museum over the long history of the McMichael, I think, and made several projects here. She's also, of course, the brilliant co-editor and I would say lead editor of this publication, which you've just had splendidly displayed before you. Bonnie, in almost all cases, was the one in our team who reached out to the writers, and it's more than 60 Indigenous writers in this book. It was a massive, massive project. And we had a tremendous time doing it. It was wonderful, involving sessions where we did this kind of thing, laying pictures out on the floor and scrambling around on our hands and knees trying to figure out how the whole thing would come together. But Bonnie was definitely the presiding creative spirit extraordinaire of that whole project. She's an interdisciplinary artist, writer, and educator. Her installation and video works have been shown and collected nationally and internationally and have been acknowledged with an Ontario Lieutenant Governor's Heritage Award, OCAD University's Distinguished Research Creative Practice Award in 2019, and the Governor General's Award in Visual and Media Arts in 2021. She recently retired from Ontario College of Art and Design University, where she was an associate professor and the founding chair of OCAD's Indigenous Visual Culture Program. Bonnie, thank you so much for all the brilliant thoughts and wisdom and patience and open-heartedness that you bring to all of us at the McMichael. We're so honored to have you leading our discussion today. Ladies and gentlemen, Bonnie Devine and her wonderful gang.
Oh, there's stairs.
Hey, Paul, good to see you.
So I decided today to speak to you kind of off the cuff, to keep things informal and casual and friendly and in the spirit of what Maria just offered us, which is celebration. I wanted to open this talk by introducing our panel, of course. On the far left is Barry Ace. Barry Ace is a visual artist living in Ottawa. He is a Debendazigig. Citizen of Chiging First Nation on Manitoulin Island. Yeah. Yes. Representing, eh? Barry's practice embraces the impact of the digital age, and you will see his work in the gallery. It's the Foxtail Moccasins. And his work talks about how the digital age has transformed exponentially and how it infuses deeply and kind of naturally Anishinaabe culture. This is what one of Maria's questions was about, like, what is the word for art in our language? There is no real word for art, because for us, art is an expanded field of expression, inspiration, dream, memory, and teaching. Barry talks about new technologies and new ways of communicating in his work, and we're going to hear more from Barry about this very subject when we get into the panel. So Barry Ace, please welcome him. Sitting next to Barry is Paul Seesequasis. He's a Can you hear me? Everything okay? Okay, good. Willow Creek, I'm not going to try and pronounce the name of your nation. Maybe you could tell us.
I'll just say Willow Creek as well.
Oh, okay. Okay. Paul is a curator, a writer, a journalist, a cultural advocate, and a commentator from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. He has been active in the Indigenous arts as an artist, a policymaker, and more. I would say much, much more. In the Indigenous art world since the 1990s. Since 2015, he has curated the Indigenous Archival Photo Project, an online and physical exhibition of archival Indigenous photographs that explores history, identity, and the process of visual reclamation. This is enormously important work. We've had a number of conversations already today about the importance of the archive, and I hope that we will continue those conversations. But Paul has done pioneering work in this field, and we're so excited to hear what you have to say about that in our talk. Paul is the author of Blanket Toss Under Midnight Sun, Portraits of Everyday Life in 8 Indigenous Communities, that was published in 2019, and People of the Watershed, Photographs of John McPhee, that was published in 2024, just very, very recently. Please welcome Paul Seesequasis. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry if I'm crackling. Shelley Niro. So thrilled to have you with us here, all of you. But Shelley, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to come and speak to us today. Shelley Niro is a member of the Turtle Clan, Bay of Quinte Mohawk Six Nations Grand River Reserve. Shelley is a practicing artist, of course, concentrating on painting, photography, and film. Niro was the inaugural recipient of the Aboriginal Arts Award, which was presented through the Ontario Arts Council in 2012, so the very first recipient of that really important recognition. In 2017, Niro received the Governor General's Award for the Arts, the Scotiabank Photography Award, and the Natition Foundation Reveal Award. In 2022, Niro was presented with the Paul DeHuc and Norman Walford Career Achievement Award from the Ontario Arts Foundation. Niro is an honorary elder in the Indigenous Curatorial Collective. Please welcome Shelley Niro. Thank you to all of you. I wanted to open our talk today first with a introduction of how I came to be involved in the Early Days project. As Sarah mentioned, we started work on the book, and it was during the thinking, I think, the early thinking about the idea of having a publication to accompany the exhibition, that I was invited, along with Alan Corbier, who is on the right in this photograph, and Ruth Phillips, who is in the center of this photograph. We were invited here, and we actually met in this room. And when we walked into this room, it was COVID. You can see we have masks on. I think it was 2021, maybe 2022. It's all a blur now, that COVID time. But we came, and we all were maintaining social distancing, sort of. And here, where we're standing, there was a table laid out. It was covered in an immaculate white tablecloth. And displayed on that table were some customary objects. These objects had come into the McMichael without provenance. And those of you who are in the curatorial or art field know that for the most part, when a piece is acquired by an institution, it has a history. It comes with a written history. These pieces came with very, very scant information about where they were made, when they were made, most importantly, who made them, but also how they were acquired. What were they paid for? Was it a gift? All of this information is incredibly important to maintain a history of the piece outside of the institutional memory of the building. The piece has its own history. In many ways, it's a being. And certainly when Alan and Ruth and I came here and saw these pieces, we saw them not as works of art, not as objects of material culture, but as beings. And this is how we addressed them. I'm the one in charge of changing the slides too. So that was one thing. We began this discussion about what are these pieces and what do they mean. And a number of years later, I would say maybe 3 years later, I'm looking to Sarah because Sarah was, steering this process from beginning to end. So I'm hoping Sarah remembers better than I do. But several years later, when COVID was over, and you can see people were coming into the gallery and were looking at the works that were here. By this time, the exhibition, early days, had moved on and was on tour around North America. But we brought in, the McMichael brought in scholar, historian, carver, from, am I still okay? Yeah, okay. William Wadston. William came here and went down into the collection, into the basement of the building, and looked at various pieces. And then, after a number of days exploring the collection and looking at the objects, he gave a lecture. He gave a number of lectures, one of the ones I was very privileged to attend, in which he instructed us about the truth of some of the works in the collection and in this very room. He talked to us first about the lintel that's over the door that you came in and the table that runs down the length of this gallery. He knew the artist. In fact, the artist was his mentor and had been a very important instructor to him. And I can't remember his name right now. Who? Doug Cranmer. He knew right away who it was. Now, just to have that little bit of information, you can't imagine. Like, he stunned us. We were, after that, his servants. We just listened to what he had to say. He moved from the table and the lintel to the two poles that are standing here in this room, and in fact have stood in this room since, I think, the 70s. Mr. McMichael had originally envisioned that this hallway would be a kind of temple to Northwest Coast art, which is why he had these really important pieces here. And what William did was he read those poles. And when I said that the word that I know of for Indigenous art in Anishinaabe has to do with writing and reading and making those kind of marks, he read those poles from the bottom figure to the top, each one. He knew the provenance of those poles, he knew the maker, and he knew the language that they were using to tell a story. There's a history in those poles. It's a document. It's a text. So William Wadston was another person who was instrumental in allowing us to approach the works in the exhibition and the works in the book with this deep understanding that they are carriers, that they are texts in some ways, and that our job is to open them as one would a book, to allow them to be read. The book followed. And as Sarah said, there was a day when we had every page in the book laid out in this room, because it was the only room that we had that was big enough to allow us to look at, well, will this picture go here? Will that picture, should we put the essay in the front? You know, all of that kind of mechanical work, that is really like a sculptural project to make that book come to life and to give it a structure that would allow it to be read and allow it to be used, actually, as a teaching instrument. I still keep thinking about Alan's question about that word. This is that word, Mesokalpikoen. I can't say it right now. I need to see it spelled out. It's complicated. But yes, a teaching rock. And of course, this is Dana Claxton's beautiful piece on the cover of our book. She's our cover girl, and we mourn that she's not with us today. We wish she were, but she's with us in spirit in this beautiful image. Okay, I come now to our panel. And what the panel is going to be divided into two parts. So the first part is going to be each one of our artists speaking the work that they have done for this exhibition. And the first one will be Barry. And this is Barry's piece called Foxtail Moccasins. Barry.
Very much, Bonnie. My work basically is a confluence between the historical and contemporary. So I'm always looking for evidence of our material culture and how I can engage with it. And what I do with my work is that I will bring it into a contemporary context. So I will introduce new media to the work, and then I'll present it to address social, cultural, political issues. I had the opportunity to exhibit in the North American Native Museum in Zurich, Switzerland in 2013, and I got to go there. And that's when I first encountered the work of Carl Bodmer. And Carl Bodmer was very much like the frontier artists or photographers like George Catlin or Edward Curtis. In the 1830s, he was commissioned by Prince Maximilian of Wied to travel up the Missouri and document the flora and fauna along that would eventually culminate into a book that Prince Maximilian produced in 1835. Within the North American Native Museum, they had a complete set of Carl Bodmer's etchings and aquatints. And that's when I first encountered the work that he had done with the Mandan. And there were two spiritual warriors. One was Yellowtail, and the other one was Eagle War Chief. And those two figures were so powerful to me, because that's when I started to look at the regalia.
Can I show the
Oh, you have a photo of it? Okay.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, yeah, there it is. And so you'll notice the footwear right away. And these footwear, these ones are ceremonial, but often moccasins had hide trailers out the back, and it was to erase your tracks. These ones are more ceremonial pieces. And so, you know, when I started to look at these, I thought, you know, I started thinking about erasure. I thought about the paradigm of disappearance. I started to think about salvage archaeology in terms of what Bodmer was encountering as they were collecting the material culture along the way. So I immediately wanted to make a pair. So I did two pair. Michael Belmore, Anishinaabe artist, he gave me a pair of fluvogs, swordfish boots, and I did a pair called Nigik Muxinan, which are otter moccasins. And they then, about 2 years later, I completed the companion pair, which is the foxtail. So I recreated those particular ones. My work, as I mentioned, incorporates beadwork, but it also incorporates electronic components. In Anishinaabe-Moin, the word for beads is Mededominense. It means little spirit energy berries. So within Anishinaabe art, it's about art and power.
Yeah.
always an energy within it. So when you're stitching beads together, you're stitching actual energy. There's a beautiful simile between the electronic component and the glass bead, because both can store and transform and transfer energy. So when you go to a gathering and you see floral beadwork and people are dancing, those that are witnessing it are being healed. That power, that energy of the healing plants, the medicines that are represented are spread out. So very much like the electronic component, that it can store and it can release energy. I wanted to also challenge this notion that Anishinaabe art was in stasis, that we can use contemporary materials. People often say, who do you do your work for? I say, well, I do it for the community first and everybody else, because I want to look at how we can, and we always have been very, very adaptive in terms of taking colonial materials and incorporating that and bringing it in, giving it a specific Anishinaabe sensibility or aesthetic. So I always said that if women had electronic components 100 years ago, you would have still had the floral motif.
Yeah.
And then you'll see the resistors on there as well. Because, I think our history has always been about resistance. It's been about resistance to colonization and the impact of that. How can we garner our history and bring that into a contemporary context? And you're seeing that with the resurgence right now. So the resistors there are almost like coup sticks, counting the periods of resistance that we have gone to engage and reclaim our material culture and our spirituality.
Right.
That was the whole impact of colonization, was the disappearance of our material culture. And often, by looking back at these historical images, those are sometimes the only record that we have. We don't have the knowledge necessarily to remake these things, because they were taken from us, with the confiscation of the potlatch or the sundance or the Medewin ceremonial objects. And so there was so much material culture removed from our communities that these documents that are by these frontier artists are the only records of it. So again, the work it's seductive in terms of its aesthetic, but it's quite layered in terms of its political context.
Mm-hmm. Could you speak a little bit about your decision not to make hide moccasins, but to use Oxfords, like quite expensive?
Yeah, I'm not replicating these objects. I'm using them as a sounding board to bring it into a contemporary context. So they're homage, but they speak on a different level. These aren't speaking on a spiritual level, although when you look at them, you may think that. But they're actually more of a social political commentary on, the salvage ethnology and archaeology, and also about, how we were perceived as casual, sort of like victims of modernity, So there's a lot of layers within the work, and so you can look at it just for its aesthetic purpose, but you can also look into it in terms of the more contemporary issues that it's addressing.
For sure. Thank you, Barry.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask Shelley now to speak about this work, which is called Erratic Love, made in 1995.
In 1995, I was asked to do a piece for a collective out of Montreal, Native Nations, I think that's what it was called, curated by Ryan Rice, Scawanati, and Eric Robertson. And they wanted the theme to be on Native love. And it was kind of it was a new idea talking about Native love, because nobody really talked about love in any kind of Native format. It was always looking at what was there, but it was like a really exciting and interesting idea. So I asked my friend, Daniel David Moses, if he would be interested. Daniel is from the same reserve as I was. He rode the bus to high school the same time I did, but I wasn't his friend then. So that went on for years and years and years. But I met Daniel again in Banff in 1994, and he was doing a residency there, and I was doing a residency there, and we became really good friends. And I think it was because we're from the same reserve. We actually came from the same road, you know, fifth line. So he was further down the road, and I was a little bit up. It became a really nice friendship between he and I, and he said he would like to do this piece together. And it's, if you've read the poem in there, it's really kind of, I wouldn't say it's romantic, because, you know, it's just about love and expressing that. So with this rock, I found this rock in the Grand River, and it was a beautiful heart-shaped rock, and it's like perfectly sculpted by the water that ran over it for who knows how long. And I wanted to make it part of the piece. So of course there's beadwork. I always think beadwork is an important element that I like to incorporate in a lot of my work, because for years beadwork was kind of looked at as trinkets or whimsies, or you do this sort of thing to sell, you know, to make money quickly. But I always thought it was quite an important aspect of our life. I don't say art making because, you know, again, that word art was not really part of beadwork. So I got this pillow, beaded it, put the rock on top, and then I got blueberry juice, and I put that juice on my hand and I put it on that rock to more or less make it, give it some kind of the human touch. And then, of course, you can see that Daniel's piece is in its own framed area in the piece. So it, you know, that show went to quite a few places. It was traveled around the country. I don't exactly know where it went, but it was an icebreaker, and it really showed you that you can make different kinds of work being a Native person, and you know, you have to stick to what people think is Native art. So it was really kind of a nice, beautiful piece of work that we did together. Yeah. Sadly, Daniel passed away in 2022, I believe. And, you know, but we're together forever. And so I like to think this piece is, you know, our baby.
Yeah.
So that's what I have to say about that piece.
Okay. I'd like to ask a question, if I may, about so what's interesting here is the different materials that you've chosen. There's the velvet and the pillows. There's the text and the rock. There's also a fair amount of metal work in this piece. Could you talk a little bit about how that came to be incorporated?
Ironwork was a big part of the economic structure of the reserve. Like, men went to work in ironwork to bring money back home. And so I thought it was also important to make that part of the piece as well. Like, you know, sort of referencing back to the economics of the reserve and how people fulfill that part of their life by, you know, the men going out and working in ironwork. And that's another history that is also talked about quite a bit on the reserve, and it sort of plays a big part in the, you know, in the dialogue, or the kind of like, you know, I have a brand new son-in-law, and he's an iron worker, and that's all he talks about. So I just wanted to make a point that, you know, ironwork is still alive and well on the Six Nations.
Wow. One of the things that always struck me about the history of the Six Nations and the ironworkers is that they worked on many of the tall skyscrapers in New York City and here in Toronto even. And every time I see this piece, I think of that. They're like those skyscraper towers, and to put, this was perilous work at that time, really dangerous. And to put them on top of those towers seems to me to be a kind of homage to the difficulty and the rigors of life back in that era. Now you have a son-in-law who's still doing this. So, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you, Shelley.
thank you.
Paul his work is not exhibited in the galleries for early days, but his work is in the catalog as a writer and critic and observer of Merrill McMaster's work, and more importantly, the role of the photographic archive and the way that Merrill is mobilizing that practice. So, Paul, if you could talk about this.
Certainly, Bonnie. So we're looking at Between the Start of Things and the End of Things by Merrill McMaster. And let me just get down here. Here we are. And you're absolutely right. These are not my photographs. I wish they were. They're actually Merrill McMaster's. But when I was honored to be part of the early days and to be approached to write something. And I didn't talk to Merrill at all. I didn't want to talk to Merrill about the story she's telling in this. I actually wanted to write my own narrative to it. Not an interpretation, I'm against interpretation, but my own story from Merrill's images. So what I'll do is read some text that was inspired by Between the Start of Things and the End of Things, 2019. And it was I kind of tried to do it within a time frame. Like I said, I have 10 minutes to write this, let's do it. So it was really, I wanted to be spontaneous as opposed to something I look at 2 weeks later and edit this and edit that. I obviously went to text editing when I went to the McMichael, thankfully, but this is it. Mr. Sinney, the big stones that once dotted the prairies are survivors. And we see one of them right there with Merrill. Many of them have been shattered, removed, and erased as obstructions to modern agriculture and to ranching. So if you might see these stones, and you still find them around the plains of Saskatchewan and Alberta, they're usually behind a fence or protected now. There used to be many more. They were usually blown up, moved. There were obstructions to settlement. There were obstructions to ranching. There were obstructions to growing crops. So all these stones, all these things that were part of the land since immemorial many of them were blown up, etc. So I just want to give that context to these stones, these talking stones. A few remain, sometimes surrounded by the last vestiges of native prairie grasslands. They have their own stories. Many were once rubbing stones for the bison to scratch away itches and to rub off the remnants of winter coats. And many were markers, letting ancient ones know how far they had come and how far they had yet to go. And many were places to leave offerings, to dream in one's own thoughts, and find a singular vision removed from the ordinary. And again, this is that singular narrative, not a collective narrative. So each of us has our own singular journey when we go to these stones. We're not sharing a common journey. It's how it affects us. Some are marked by long ago artisans with signs and symbols, and like faded ochre, traces remain, as do the cracks and the crevices where offerings were once placed. Lichen clings to the surface in places, in all its colors, as it always has. Some say these stones were left by glaciers, as the immense ice covered, then retreated from these lands. But others say they have their own origin stories, from Cayas long ago. We see ourselves around these rocks, we touch them, we climb to their summit, we leave something of ourselves there with the rock, as others have done and will continue to do. It is somewhere before the beginning and somewhere before the end. The rock will be there, and the rock will remember us. It has always been that way. It will always be that way until the end. Wow. That was the story.
Wow. Wow. It's so beautiful.
as immense as the sky. And let me just get this going here. Here we go. I'm so used to a mouse, and I'm never good when you have to do it on this touchpad. It drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So if I throw the computer, it's nothing to do with you. Well, I'm going to read from A Still Quiet Place because it still fits in with the concept of as immense as the sky. And again, it's basically taking Merle's imagery, her photography, and telling a story from it. Powhatan, a dream spirit, lives in the images of Merle McMaster. It is in the state between consciousness and dreaming, where the images within the mind have yet to fade and be consumed by the banalities of day-to-day, that a new conscious existence is forged. It is in that fragile space where we still possess the fleeting possibility of imagining our own worlds, that veil of unreal vision that has yet to be lifted, that allows us to walk in between, on the edge, and not fall. That a limitless creation is realized before the reality of awakeness, of contemporary modernity, before it consumes us. It is that still quiet space, that whisper in the grasses, where what we hear is that something deep inside us, buried within layers of memory, like silk, that protects ancestral memories and voices that speak to us across infinite distance. A delicate cocoon, woven that has been built instinctively to protect our beings, ourselves, from the ravages that relentlessly try to erase us. So that's basically the same riff I would have had with this one.
Yes. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
We're going to now move to the second part of our presentation today, where we'll have a more general discussion and history of the work that these artists have been engaged in for many years, for decades, and the work that continues on. And I just feel so very grateful to be able to present these three thinkers and artists here today to talk about this important aspect of, that word again coming up, what is art? And what is the word that we have for art? So, without further ado, I'm going to ask each panelist to give a very brief history of what they have been doing, what they are doing right now, and what they hope to do in the future, maybe. So first of all, we'll talk about early days of Indigenous curators. And we have none other than Barry Ace, who was one of the founding, what would we say? One of the
founders.
Yeah, one of the founders of what was then called the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective. And I'm going to let Barry talk about this. I have some slides, and I'll just move through them. These are slides that come from Barry's own archive. They are incredible historical documents and speak once again to the importance of documenting and archiving our history. Because most of the people that are in these photos are still with us. They're still alive. Yeah. So I'll just go through.
I'd like to contextualize before I talk about
Yeah.
the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective. I spent just shy of 10 years working for the Department of Indigenous Affairs, now called CIRNAC, then it was called Indian Affairs. And I worked with one of the most important collections of contemporary Indigenous art in the world. At that time, it was around 2,500 works of art. It's well beyond that now. And the uniqueness about that particular collection, it was built by Indigenous curators. So it's unique in that perspective. So my first responsibility was to do an inventory and work with the art. I remember one of my very first days, I had to spend the entire afternoon with Alex Janvier and Robert Houle, showing them works of Jackson Beardy. They were working on a retrospective exhibition that was at the WAG. And, so it was, this position that I was in was so important as a young curator because I was working with my antecedents. These are people that I would I would garner my knowledge from. To hear Alex and Robert speak to these works was phenomenal. I also had a lot of time, spent a lot of time with Tom Hill as well. And so that's where you garner the history of the curatorial practice for our community. It comes from a long legacy of advocacy and fighting to make room. These artists, the first generation, which would be like Robert and Tom Hill and Daphne too. Daphne, you can't separate the politics and what the artists were representing through that historical time period, because we were influenced by the politics, what was going on in terms of our advocacy for our rights, for our environment, for our cultural patrimony. So during that time at the Indigenous Art Center, I worked with Ryan Rice. Ryan Rice now runs the on-site gallery at OCAD. Ryan and I worked together for a number of years, and we started a program, a very exciting program. I look at this as my Belle Epoque. This was when we were working, creating an exhibition program, where it was an adjudicated program, and we would bring in emerging mid-career and senior artists to exhibit at the Indigenous Art Center. And so what we did was we did basically an exhibition a month. Can you imagine an exhibition every month? And we showed Shelley's work. I wrote for Shelley. I remember how terrified I was. Shelley, we did a studio visit. We were driving back to Shelley's house, and then Shelley turns to me and said, "What are you going to write about?" I was like, "I don't know." And so her exhibition for Fearless and Other Indians was presented, and we did a catalog. We did everything in-house. We also engaged Indigenous critical writers as well. That was part of it. It was really important for us to do it, so we linked up Audra Simpson with Greg Statz, for example. Maria Hupfield had her early show as well with that program. With Danny Cutfeet, it was a two-person show. So those were very exciting times. We really felt that we were doing something. So in 1997, Leanne Martin was at the Canada Council in the Aboriginal Arts Secretariat. And she was the First Peoples Equity Coordinator, I think it was. And she brought, at that time, what was the Indigenous Curatorial community together to Ottawa to have a discussion about what was needed. You could fit the entire Indigenous Curatorial community at that time in a restaurant. I mean, there wasn't that many people working at that time. But again, you see people like Tom Hill and Lynn Hill as well. And Lynn Hill worked here at the McMichael at that particular time in 1997. And this was the first time that we had all come together to sort of talk about what our aspirations were for the Canada Council programming. We talked about how we wanted to increase mentorship opportunities for Indigenous curators. We wanted institutions to hire us. We wanted to be able to curate non-Indigenous artists. We wanted to have professional standards. We didn't want to be hired because we were just Indigenous. We wanted to make sure that, that we had the skills and the expertise to bring something to the institution. So those are the kinds of things that we talked about. And then that fed into the Canada Council's program for the residency. Fed into the grant that you could get for an institution could apply to bring somebody in. So these were very exciting times. We were all working, we were all curating, we were all doing all kinds of stuff. So we'll go to the next slide. So by 2004, there were like two people working. It was Gerald McMaster and Leanne Martin. Everybody else was out of work or part-time, working independent. So we saw this whole transformation of us not being engaged in these institutions. Non-Indigenous curators were curating our exhibitions, writing about us. So we ended up wanting to do something about it. So Ryan and I got together and we said, this just can't go on like this. This is ridiculous. And so at that time as well, the Smithsonian had opened in Washington, D.C. And the Canadian the Canadian Embassy had an exhibition curated from the Canada Council Art Bank, and they did not hire an Indigenous curator to curate that exhibition. And George Miller, many people know George, remember George. He was an incredible collector and advocate. He was so infuriated when he got back to Ottawa that he wrote the Canada Council and complained about how embarrassed he was walking into an exhibition where there were no Indigenous people juxtaposed against this institution that was all Indigenous, run and presented, and said, that something had to change. And so I met George. I was at a bar, and I was sitting there, and there was George Miller. I said, "Hey, George." So George told me about this, and I said, "Do you have a copy of that letter?" And he says, "Yes, I have a copy of that letter." So Ryan and I got together, and we wrote this proposal for a framework for action. And so we went to council, and we set up a meeting. It was with Louise Prophet-LeBlanc at the time. She'd replaced Leanne. She was the First Peoples Equity Coordinator. And we vetted it through. William Kingfisher, Steve Loft, Kathy Matties, and we all had input into it. And it was a framework for action, strategic goals that we wanted to do. And there was no grant at Canada Council that we could apply for to bring this group together. So Louise found $50,000. She called it a director's grant, and gave us $50,000 to bring everybody to Ottawa. So we did. We brought the Indigenous community to Ottawa. There's Paul right there, Seesequasis at the end. And that was on the rooftop of the hotel where we met. And it was an incredible time. It was the first time that we had brought curators together like that for, other than the shaping the future of the Indigenous curatorial practice. This was actually to form a nonprofit service organization that would be in support of Indigenous curators and the critical community, because the critical community is totally integrated into us.
Yes.
We have to work hand in hand. So this was the founding group, so we can just kind of scroll through some of them. This was the day that we spent there. So there was like Jeff Thomas, myself, William Kingfisher, Leanne Hirondell, Uk Cheese, Heather Igliorte, Eddie Poitras, Ryan Rice, Scawanati, Frank Shabagagit, Ahasu, Muskegon Ishkwe, Lori Blondo, Marcia Crosby, July Papazzi, Steve Loft, and Paul Seesequasis. and then Louise was off to the side there. So we spent 3 intense days, pulling together what we wanted to do with the curatorial collective. So. So there's Eddie Poitras and Ron Naganosh, Lori Blondo. Okay, we can just kind of go through them. So eventually we ended up pulling the organization together. And, we did all this. It was kind of like a DIY of the 80s. We just did it. Nobody got paid, or a few people did, but not a lot of people got paid. There were some contracts hidden out. Ahasu had been contracted, and he had brought to the table, he had a lot of expertise in developing nonprofit service organizations. So we did the articles of the corporation and the bylaws. We had Yvonne Boyer, an Indigenous lawyer, who donated her entire time for free, pro bono, to get us the document, and we filed it with Industry Canada, and we basically were up and running. And so we said the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a conference, and we're going to do it in Winnipeg. So we went to Urban Shaman. Steve Loft was running Urban Shaman then, and Robert Houle's exhibition, Nomenclature, Apache Bombs and Helicopters. We had the vernissage, the official opening, and then Robert shuts the exhibition down the next day so that we could all meet. And, so that was the kind of community, the tight-knit community that we had. Everybody wanted to participate. And so Tom Hill was there as well. At the conference. So this was all kinds of exciting events. What we did was it was Ryan's idea to have these kind of get up and present yourself for 5 minutes and then go sit down. So basically curators got up and they presented on their topics of what they were working on. There's Bonnie and Celeste. This would have been from Art Gallery of Peterborough. this would have been when Bonnie was working on the Daphne Ojig retrospective, so Bonnie presented on that. Kent Monkman was there, Kent presented on his work, and Wanda was there, and so, you know, it was just, we had an incredible weekend at that particular, and one thing that was really powerful, and I was telling Bonnie this, is that Tom Hill had never been honored by the curatorial community of editors. So we went out, William Kingfisher and I, and we went out and got an eagle feather, and we presented Tom Hill with an eagle feather. And it was so moving. Tom got up and he sang a goodbye song in Seneca. And it was so moving. I don't think there was a dry eye in the room. But it was, we felt the importance of what Tom was doing. He was passing on, or, you know, or entrusting us more so with, you know, the power to curate and bring the community forward, because these guys like Robert or Joan Cardinal Schubert or, you know,
Daphne.
Tom Hill and Daphne, they all did it on their own. So here we had a whole coalescence of curators to do it. So so that was our first conference, and then our second conference was in Saskatoon. Yeah. And by that time, the organization was up and running, and it was Black Flash magazine approached us, and they gave us the entire magazine. So I did the feature article I wrote on Rosalie Favel, and then there were all of these. The whole publication was for the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective, and we worked closely with Tribe, run by Laurie Blondo, to pull that together. So it was exciting times. And you know, one thing that there's one aspect before I finish that, within the Articles of the Corporation, the bylaws, we had this big long discussion. We said, we don't like organizations that go along forever and never or just keep taking money and don't really do anything. So we had a self-destruct button built in there. So every 5 years, the organization has to ask the membership if they're still relevant. So I thought that was really powerful. And the other thing we did too was we had a bibliography at that time when we started it. And we decided that we would list all the non-Indigenous writers and curators' articles in the bibliography. And then we would highlight the Indigenous curatorial. They would be bolded, the Indigenous curators and their contributions. And we thought it was important to mix the two, because it would allow our curators to look back at what had been written from their cultural perspective and be able to respond to it. So those were the kind of things that we were thinking about back then.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Barry. Thank you for that work. Next, I'm going to ask Paul to talk a little bit about his work in the archive. And I've taken this from your own quote, which is reframing and reclaiming the archival image. And Paul's done some amazing, important, groundbreaking work in this field.
Thanks, Bonnie. Just to give a little bit of background, the Indigenous Archival Project was kind of a project that I guess I'm not exaggerating by saying it kind of happened organically. My mom attended St. Michael's Residential School in Saskatchewan, graduated in 1954, became one of the first generation of Indigenous nurses in Canada, along with a small cohort of nurses at that time. She was that first graduating class and became a registered nurse. Her becoming a nurse meant that she had to move off reserve. She married my father, who was of Ukrainian descent, so that added to that. So I basically grew up as a nurse's boy, I guess you would say. You know, wherever she was stationed is where I would be. I quickly learned not to have friends for longer than 2 or 3 years, because I'd be moving by then anyways, and they're gone. So that was the life, moving from town to town, wherever she got stationed. And when the Truth and Reconciliation stuff happened, and God, how long? That's going back a few years now. And my mom was one of the witnesses, and a lot of the stuff was just coming up in the media. Then, of course, it was pretty much on front page. And she just said to me one day that, it's not all doom and gloom. There were things happening, there were good times, there were strength and resilience, all these kind of cliche words we threw around, but she meant them as being real. And I began to look for images that kind of framed this alternative history of us, because everything was these black and white images of a residential school, and people getting hit, and rulers, and electric chairs. And there was nothing to say to get beyond victory. And that's really what I wanted to do. I was reading a lot of Wisner at the time and really kind of rebelling against that kind of thinking, and also as reconciliation became an official policy of always trying to have a critical take on it, because I think that's a very important thing to keep in perspective. So the project, essentially that was the heart of it, is to frame a positive image of our kinships, our families, our relations, and using archival photography, both from Indigenous photographers, but the majority being non-Indigenous, because those were the people generally wielding the cameras professionally at the time. So this picture, Marie Mickenick and her grandson, Birchbark Canoe, was taken by John McPhee in 1956. She was an interesting woman who lived out on the land, only came into town to get supplies that she would need, bullets for rifle, canned goods to get through the winter. And she was there with one of her grandchildren, and John McPhee had heard about her. And so he waited at the lake, about to give up, and suddenly he sees this canoe in the distance, and it was her coming in. And she made that birch bark canoe herself, and this is a record of it. She'd be another person, I guess, who would just disappear into history if McPhee had not been there that day. He took a series of photos, and for me it was important to get that into what became the People of the Watershed exhibition here, that opened here at the McMichael. And thank you to the McMichael and Sarah and for everyone for being open to showing that exhibition. So again, it's our history, it's the kinships we have, and it's the fact that our histories are not just famous people, they're us, and how photography can kind of expand our imprint that we have in this brief span of life. And it became this book, which is the exhibition catalog from 2024. Again, another John McPhee photo. This is at Neskatanga, which you see in the news still they've been waiting, boiling water advisories, et cetera. Now the Ring of Fire stuff is happening in Ontario. So these photos for me really capture an important period of time in that area. They show the longevity of the people who live there, their integrity, their relation to the land. They show their relationship to the outside world. Obviously, we see the woman and the girl, they're all wearing plaid that they picked up at the northern store, the Hudson Bay store at the time. So this relationship, we go from beading to trading to the tartans, all that is, that passion is part of the history. And that's what I loved about John McPhee's photographs. He caught this at a period of time before snowmobiles, before cars, before there were many planes. So this is a transitionary period, if you will, and it really is when trapping was still a viable occupation. So we're talking 50s, early 60s. And to me, it was a very important record.
Yes, yes.
This is more recently, this is last year, People of the Watershed, and it contained 100 and some photos by John McPhee. And it was interesting because part of my project was based on social media at the time. It's not anymore, and I'll get to that at the end. But that's where I ran into John McPhee. He was in his 90s, and he was still posting things on Facebook from his home in Parry Sound. And I'd come across his name through the Archives of Ontario because they had his photos. And I was curious, is this person still alive? Who was he? How did he travel to all these communities? Because no one did that. No professional photographer would be traveling to all these little communities in Northern Ontario, taking photos unless they were anthropologists or something. His photos clearly weren't. Like he had his friends in there, Cree friends, Anishinaabe friends, and who is this guy? And I found he's still alive. I made contact with him on Facebook. And he was very easy to get along with. He was sharp, He's one of those people who's blessed with a very sharp mind till the end, And he was in his mid-90s and sharp as nails. So we were able to pull together what became this exhibition. I was really fortunate to encounter him when I did, because he passed, within a year of me meeting him. So we got a lot done in that time.
Wow.
This is more recent work. Actually, it's on right now at the Momenta Biennale in Montreal. And it's Michael Deerhouse. He's one of the players of the Royal Ganawaggas, who are a lacrosse team who toured Great Britain in 1876, playing against, they were labeled as the Iroquois Indians playing against the Canadian gentlemen. So there was a settler team of lacrosse players who went over, and the wild Indians, of course. So they did this exhibition tour of Ireland, Scotland, England. They played the games, of course. There's etchings, there's writings. I've only dug the surface, but there's a fair amount of stuff about that tour. And what I wanted to do was take this 1876 team and give them an honorary Sports Hall of Fame. I really wanted to bring together, first thing, I don't like this divide between sports and art. I wanted to bring that together. I wanted this to be as much something that attract sports enthusiasts as it would attract artists. So each player on these, there were 13 people, members of the Royal Ganawaggas. Each of them has their own sports banner now. These photos were taken by William Notman, who was kind of like the Elon Musk of photography at the time. He quickly realized photography could be lucrative. Middle-class Canadians would want pictures of their babies, their mothers, themselves married. So he opened up these studios. He had studios all across Canada, the United States. He became the official royal photographer for Canada for the royal family, which is huge. He became the official photographer for the National Railway as Canada's national dream was being built. So he went along there. Those are interesting photos because he did photograph Indigenous people, but they were always on the sidelines as kind of the past. So, he was in no way a progressive guy, but he did take this, he was commissioned to take photographs of the team either before they went on tour. So you see them in their uniforms. They wore red and white striped jerseys, blue shorts, and kind of cream-colored leggings. So the team colors are on the back of the sports banners, and then the interior is the actual portraits that William Notman took of the players. That regalia, you see, the head regalia, they actually wore in the games. It was kind of a blue with beaded things, and the feathers were dyed all different colors. And then projected down, of course, is the one group photo we have of the team that William Notman took, which is projected down on there. So I wanted to kind of have that Sports Hall of Fame for this team.
Wow. Yeah.
And just a look at the team.
I'm going backwards. I beg your pardon.
Sorry.
That's
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
So that's the story of the team. I'll just wrap up by saying doing the archival work has been interesting. I just had a discussion with AI Indigenous curator, Cinnamon T, who's out in Vancouver. Obviously, there's humans behind this thing. And just debating what the future is of photography, of art in general, in an AI age when everything is manipulatable, everything can be taken, everything we post on Meta or on whether it's Facebook, I was going to say Twitter, X now, Instagram, TikTok, everything is possessed by AI. So what is that going to mean? What is it going to mean for the history of photography, the archival image? And I'm sure you've probably seen it on social media, these little things where you can preserve your ancestors' photos and see them come alive, and suddenly you see Granny, who's been dead for 40 years, get up and smile at you and wave. So all this is just on the cusp. It's just infancy. 10 years from now, we won't know the difference between what's real, what's AI. So how do we negotiate that? How do we find authenticity? How do we protect our own integrity as not just individual people with souls, but as communities with a collective soul? If AI is running the government, or most of the government, they're bringing in the jobs now, is creating the images, is creating the movies, whole AI movies without having to hire real actors along the way. So all this stuff is just kind of percolating, and I don't have the answers for that, but I just find it a very scary, at the same time, very exciting time to kind of see the limits of technology and how we preserve our histories, who we are, our art in the context of the age to come.
Yes.
Thank you.
For sure. Thank you. We'd like to now look at early days of an Indigenous artist. It's not only going to focus on Shelley's early days, of course, we're going to try and talk about the arc of that career and how it's, you know, it speaks, I think, to what both of you have been talking about. So, Shelley.
This piece was done in, let me think, let me remember. It was so early. 1991. Okay, thank you. I always say during this period I couldn't afford color photography. So what I did was print out black and whites and then hand color them. And then I also used a Dremel drill to make the beadwork marks on the mat board. And this piece is called The Iroquois is a Highly Developed Matriarchal Society. And this is a sentence that I always heard in history books, you know, growing up, you'd read in school, oh, the Iroquois is a highly matriarchal society. And it's like, what? So I really wanted to question, like, what is this? And how are we addressing this in our own community? And, you know, and are we addressing it? Because, you know, at the time, there seemed to be a lot of dysfunction on the reserve. And I wanted to think, well, if we are matriarchal, how do we as matriarchs make it a better community? In this photograph, it's like a triptych. It's my mom, and she was really, she's really playful. She really wanted to participate in work that I wanted to do, and I often asked her, can I take a picture of you? And she always said yes, of course. And so, you know, this time she is sitting under this hairdryer, and then she puts her head into the hairdryer. So I just made a piece out of that. I don't know what else to say about it, but I really wanted to have fun with the work that I was doing. I wanted people who looked at the work to have fun while they're looking at it as well. And I think the first audience of my work was my own family, like my sisters and my brother. Not so much my brother, more or less my sisters. But I wanted them to be able to look at the work and recognize who was in the work and what the work was doing. And, you know, but hearing how they responded, it really gave me permission to continue on, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have kept on going if they said, oh, what is that all about? But I just, you know, kept on. I don't know if I would really take it that seriously, what they told me. But, you know, I just thought, okay, what do you think of this piece? And they go, oh, it's kind of weird, but, you know, but that was that year. So I don't know if you want to go to another one. Oh, this one. This is called Homage to the Old Ones, and this was done in, anybody know? I think it was around 1995, and I was doing a lot of work with rocks at the time. I got so obsessed with going to the river, looking for rocks, and seeing, you know, which rock spoke to me. With this particular piece, I had 4 different layers: mountain, lake, river, and sea. And from each of those areas, I would find these rocks that I could use and put them in this square piece of this work. And it's homage to the old ones. And it's like, you know, it's like if you really want to look at your environment, look at nature which is around you, it's something you can be so grateful for. You don't have to get in a jet and go far away to appreciate something, go to a museum in Paris. It's right in front of you. So that's what this piece was about. Oh, this is done in 2017. This kind of comes from a few trips to New York State. And there was another series I did where I took photos of road signs that said, you know, in 1776, Sullivan was here and he destroyed an Indian village. And if you go to Cuba Lake in New York State, you'll come across these signs, and it looks like they're well taken care of. They're painted, they're kept up to date, they're made to look fresh. And I like to say that my sister was with me during this time, and she was really affected. She got pretty emotional looking at those signs. Hardcore me, I didn't. So I just took the photos and went to the next sign and went to the next sign. But once you see all these signs together, you think, holy smokes, what, this really gives you an indication what happened in this territory and how it became the United States of America. Going past that, I found these little plastic Indians, and they are, people go, ew. But I really became attached to them because they're really well sculpted. There's muscle tone in the bodies, and they're about this big, so I could really take a good look at them. So combining the history of New York State, finding these statues, and then finding these really pretty, elegant, I think they're not ceramic, but they're like plaster figurines, and putting them on top of a landscape, it indicates, beauty, grace, and touch of terror. That's why I call it Day at the Beach. So it's like combining all the elements together and trying to create some kind of emotional response to, what I was trying to do with these guys. Yeah, I did these, the same guys, and it's called Then Everybody Got Mad. So it's like making a narrative about the drama that takes place in this particular area of New York State. I should say I'm an artist, I work alone, and this is what I do to have fun. And then I say, is that funny? This piece is called Indian Brains. It's a drawing of my granddaughter, and it's quite large. It's like 9 feet tall by 4 feet, and it was done for a show at Luminata, curated by Sally Frater in, 2017. And it's really trying to think, like, how do our brains think differently than what, the way we're supposed to think? And I just kind of wanted to make a quick sketch of, there's like the nature. We always think about living in nature and how our ancestors lived in nature and how we address nature in our work. And then on the other side is the construct of the brain itself, like there's a synapses, there's just other things that are going on. But I really wanted to have a drawing of, of sort of looking at that. This is probably the last piece I did, and it's called Raven at Night. Again, I used my grandchild quite a bit in my work because she's there, and she's very pretty. But she was 12 in this period of time during COVID. She had long hair. She was a grouchy 12-year-old, and she's like, I'm going to cut my hair. I said, well, let me take photos of you before you cut your hair. So on this really hot day, I laid out my canvas so she could lay down, and I made a structure you could get up in the air, and I took some photos of her, and I came home, looked at them, and I said, we're going to have to do that again, because they weren't getting what I wanted to get. But this photograph is made up of 4 different photographs. So there's her, there's the moon, there's the stars at night, and these twigs here that sort of, look like they're flowing all over the place. And to me, it's really trying to work with Photoshop or all the technological things that I have at my hand. And I'm not that great at it, but when it works, I'm so happy. And this one time it worked, so, you're like, wow, that's pretty good. And I try to do something like that again, just doesn't work out. So, yeah, that's Raven at Night, I think. Oh,
This is the last one.
Okay, is this funny?
Yes.
I was in a store in the US, and I went through Trader Joe's, and there was a salami sitting there. And I looked at it, and I thought, to me, this is really funny. It's Italian dry salami, and it has Columbus's face on there, and California red wine with a hint of garlic. And I just thought it was really hilarious. So I wanted to go and get another one a couple years later to redo it, because you know, I took the salami out and it kind of crinkled up the wrapper. But when I went back, no, it's not there. They don't have them anymore. They have the same salami, but the wrapper's been changed. And I thought, have other people taken photos of the salami? Anyways, I think that's the last one.
That is the last slide.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Shelley. I want to say thank you to our panel. Thank you for sharing some of the history, some of the background for why you do what you do, and some of the insights that go into an artist's life when they're working in their studio and things come to them. Thank you.